Imagine walking through the streets of Pyongyang at dawn. The city is still almost sacred in its silence. The morning light hits the grey facades of buildings that all look the same, their windows dark, their curtains drawn. There is no noise, no laughter, no arguments spilling from windows. Just the rhythmic sound of boots on pavement echoing from far away. For most people here, sound itself is a risk. Words can be fatal. A whisper, a joke, even a sigh can change the course of a life. This is a place where language has been captured, dissected, and reconstructed to serve power. And behind this invisible wall of silence, there exists an organization so feared, so omnipresent, that even the mention of its name must be done in whispers. The secret police. The guardians of thought. The keepers of obedience. They do not wear uniforms in public. They blend in among the teachers, the neighbors, the market vendors. Their presence is never announced, yet everyone knows they are there. The system is designed so that no one can ever be sure who is watching. Every citizen carries the invisible weight of surveillance, of unseen eyes tracking their gestures, their tone, their hesitation before answering a question. In this country, every word has a shadow, every silence has an echo. The story of North Korea's secret police begins long before the name Democratic People's Republic was ever spoken. After the Korean War, when the land lay in ashes and ideology became the only religion that mattered, Kim Il-sung understood that to control a nation, you must first control its speech. So he created an institution of total observation, modeled partly on Stalin's KGB, but adapted to something even more intimate, something that would live not in distant offices or cold archives, but inside the very homes of citizens. They called it the Bowibu, the State Security Department, but the people gave it a simpler name, the Thought Police. Its agents were trained not just to detect rebellion, but to sense emotion, to read between words, to interpret pauses. They learned that fear is the most reliable lie detector. A man trembling at a question about the dear leader may not have done anything wrong. But in this system, guilt is an emotion, not a fact. Every child in North Korea grows up knowing that one day their loyalty will be tested. In schools, they are taught to write essays praising Kim Jong-un. They memorize stories about spies who infiltrated from the south, spreading lies, and how heroic students exposed them. But beneath the surface, something deeper happens. They learn that truth is not what is real, it is what is allowed. That to survive, one must become fluent in silence. Imagine being a child, watching your parents lower their voices every time the electricity flickers and the radio goes quiet. You ask why, and they tell you, "The walls have ears." It sounds like a proverb, but it's not. In many buildings, walls literally do. Old Soviet-style microphones hidden in state housing blocks still record fragments of conversations. In offices and schools, informants blend in as janitors, clerks, even friends. And yet the system doesn't rely only on devices or spies. It relies on people turning on each other, because in a place where confession equals survival, betrayal becomes virtue. The Bowibu built a network of trust inverted upon itself. Spouses reported on one another to prove loyalty. Children wrote statements about their parents in school notebooks. Neighbors attended self-criticism sessions where each person confessed imaginary sins, knowing that sincerity was measured not by truth, but by how convincingly one could humiliate oneself. The more emotional the confession, the safer one appeared. The less one spoke, the more suspicious one became. Silence was no longer protection. It was evidence. Over the decades, this web of surveillance evolved into something so integrated that even the agents themselves lived in fear of being watched. Promotions within the security apparatus depended on how many ideological threats one could uncover. That meant everyone, from factory workers to poets to soldiers, could become targets of investigations for something as simple as hesitating before applauding a speech. There are stories of entire families vanishing overnight after a child accidentally tore a photograph of Kim Jong-il in a textbook. No one dared to ask where they went. The absence itself became part of the landscape, a quiet warning carved into collective memory. To understand how deep this control runs, imagine the structure of conversation itself being redesigned. In North Korea, there is a hierarchy, even in speech. The honorifics used for the leaders are sacred. uttered with the kind of reverence usually reserved for prayer. Citizens practice the phrasing of gratitude to the Kim family the way others might rehearse a sermon. Even the rhythm of a sentence carries political meaning. A misplaced pause can sound like sarcasm. A lack of enthusiasm can sound like disapproval. And disapproval is indistinguishable from treason. Those who enforce this linguistic purity are not just soldiers or police officers. They are linguistic sentinels. University departments are dedicated to studying the purity of revolutionary language, filtering out expressions deemed foreign or decadent. Songs, slogans, and news broadcasts are carefully constructed to create emotional unity, what the regime calls single-hearted loyalty. When citizens speak, they echo the same vocabulary, the same tone. Over time, individuality dissolves. What remains is a collective voice that belongs to no one and everyone at once. Still, behind the facade of devotion, the fear of surveillance shapes behavior in ways that cannot be fully described. People learn to smile just enough, to nod at the right moments, to applaud with believable rhythm. Every interaction becomes a performance. Even grief must be rehearsed. When Kim Jong-il died, footage showed thousands weeping uncontrollably in the streets, collapsing in despair. Western observers often assumed it was staged. In truth, it was something worse. It was real fear. People cried because not crying could be fatal. The secret police recorded who wept with sincerity and who didn't. But surveillance in North Korea is not confined to public spaces. The state reaches into every private corner, even the mind. To speak freely is impossible, but even to think freely is dangerous. The regime's indoctrination begins so early and is so total that many citizens lose the ability to distinguish their own thoughts from state propaganda. Those who do, who somehow retain a spark of independent thought, live in silent torment, knowing that expression is suicide. They write secret journals, whisper to trusted friends under blankets, or walk to riversides at night just to breathe words into the wind, hoping it carries them away before anyone hears. Yet, the secret police are not omnipotent. They are human, bound by the same fear they enforce. Agents live with the knowledge that one wrong move, one accusation from a superior, could end their own lives. There are documented cases of officers disappearing after showing too much sympathy during interrogations. Some were reclassified as tainted by Western thought, a label that erases a person from all records. Their families are sent to re-education camps, where punishment is generational, 3 generations condemned for the crime of one. In this system, innocence is hereditary only in reverse. The machinery of surveillance doesn't stop at borders. The Bowibu maintains a vast network of spies abroad, monitoring North Korean students, diplomats, and workers sent overseas. They report on each other in coded dispatches. Even in foreign lands, they live in invisible cages. Some have defected after realizing that freedom cannot be experienced when one's family remains hostage. Others continue reporting, not out of loyalty, but out of love, for the families they hope to protect. That's the paradox of the system. It turns love itself into a tool of control. Back in Pyongyang, the illusion of normal life continues. Loudspeakers play patriotic songs from dawn until dusk. Newspapers publish headlines of triumph, harvests, and military strength. But underneath, the silence hums louder than any anthem. In this silence, fear becomes language, and the secret police become gods of perception. They do not need to see you to control you. They need only to make you believe that you are seen. For foreigners who visit the country under strict supervision, the illusion is almost perfect. The guides smile, the streets are immaculate, the people bow and wave. Yet every foreigner is assigned a minder, a cheerful, polite companion who watches every interaction. These guides are part of the outer shell of the surveillance system. They record which questions tourists ask, which buildings they photograph, how long they look at certain places. Even their smiles have meaning. Behind every guided tour is a report waiting to be filed. What most outsiders never see are the rooms where those reports converge. Deep within Pyongyang's Ministry of State Security, data from across the nation is processed by hand. Thousands of handwritten notes, surveillance photos, and intercepted communications are analyzed daily. The reports are not stored in digital archives, but in vast paper files, categorized by region and suspicion level. Every citizen has a dossier. Every voice is archived. When someone is arrested, their file is opened, their entire linguistic history examined for patterns of deviation. It is not uncommon for a person's fate to be decided by a sentence they spoke years earlier, misinterpreted through the lens of paranoia. Still, the true genius of the system lies not in technology, but in psychology. The fear of being watched is more powerful than the act itself. It breeds self-censorship so complete that people no longer need to be told what not to say. They simply forget how to say it. Language, once the instrument of freedom, becomes an internalized leash. And so, the secret police do not just monitor, they rewrite the boundaries of human thought. Night falls again in Pyongyang. The same streets that were empty at dawn are empty now. Lights glow behind identical windows. Somewhere, a family listens to a state radio that cannot be turned off. Somewhere else, a man whispers a forbidden word to himself just to feel alive. He knows no one can hear him. And yet, he feels the air tighten, as if the walls themselves disapprove. This is the genius of the system. The secret police are not merely men in coats, they are an idea, a presence woven into the fabric of existence. In North Korea, fear has no face because it wears everyone's. The city sleeps, but the silence remains awake. Every street lamp, every corridor, every unspoken thought hums with invisible surveillance. It is a nation living in performance, where every breath is calibrated, every gesture rehearsed. To the outside world, this silence seems unnatural, but to those who live within it, it is simply the sound of survival. And in that silence, the secret police continue their work, unseen, unmentioned, yet omnipresent. Not hunting rebels or spies, but words. Words that could ripple, words that could inspire, words that could remind people of something dangerous, that they are human. That is the crime they fear most. In the early hours before the city stirs, the secret police begin their day in rooms with no windows. Each officer sits before a metal desk, a small lamp flickering above files stacked like bricks in a silent fortress. They begin reading, pages filled with names, addresses, transcriptions of phone calls, and reports handwritten by neighbors. There is no sound but the scratch of a pen marking the margins. They are not hunting criminals, they are hunting inconsistencies. A pause too long in a conversation, a missing line in a loyalty report, a story that does not match another. In this world, the smallest human hesitation can be enough to condemn. The structure of control in North Korea is not chaotic. It is precise, almost mathematical. The Ministry of State Security operates in concentric circles of observation, each layer spying on the one above and below it. At the core lies the Bowibu, the central intelligence arm devoted to rooting out political disobedience. Around it orbit the Ministry of People's Security, the Workers' Party inspection divisions, and the military's political bureaus. Each branch competes for the supreme leader's favor, and in that competition, fear multiplies. To survive within the hierarchy is to constantly prove loyalty by discovering new enemies, even if one must invent them. Citizens are catalogued not as individuals, but as categories. Songbun, a caste system invisible to foreigners, but engraved into every citizen's fate. It determines whether one can live in the capital, attend university, marry a soldier, or even buy certain food. At the top are the core class, families whose ancestors fought alongside Kim Il-sung. At the bottom are the hostile, those whose relatives were landowners, Christians, or suspected of South Korean sympathies decades ago. The secret police maintain the Songbun files with obsessive detail. Births, marriages, even a careless friendship can alter a family's rank. And once downgraded, there is no return. Entire bloodlines vanish into the hinterlands because someone, somewhere, spoke too freely. Inside schools, teachers act as preliminary agents of surveillance. Each classroom has a small red notebook, the ideological diary, where students write daily reflections on how they served the revolution. The teacher collects them, evaluates their sincerity, and forwards any concerning passages to the local security office. In this way, even children become self-censors before they can read literature beyond state-approved texts. They learn to equate emotion with danger and conformity with virtue. It is a curriculum of obedience disguised as education. The state's power to control words extends beyond speech to the printed page. Every book, newspaper, and radio script passes through the propaganda and agitation department, which works hand in hand with the secret police. Editors receive directives outlining not only what stories to publish, but what emotions those stories must evoke. If a headline announces a military victory, the accompanying article must contain a minimum of 5 sentences of joy, 3 of gratitude, and 1 of militant resolve. Failure to convey the prescribed emotion is treated as ideological sabotage. Reporters disappear for misjudging the proper tone of triumph. Foreign radio signals are treated as infections. In border towns, patrols with scanning devices walk through neighborhoods at night, detecting illegal frequencies. When a signal is found, they trace it to a house, burst inside, and drag out the family while the neighbors watch in silence. The following morning, the street returns to normal as if nothing happened. But a new whisper spreads. Someone was caught listening. That whisper becomes its own form of propaganda, fear disguised as rumor, enforcing compliance without a single poster or slogan. To understand how deep the surveillance runs, one must look at the network of Inminban, the neighborhood watch units. Every block, every apartment complex has a leader responsible for monthly meetings where residents review one another's behavior. Attendance is mandatory. At these gatherings, people confess minor infractions, being late to work, neglecting to clean a portrait of the leader, failing to display enough enthusiasm during national celebrations. The confessions are ritualized, yet the fear is real. The leader records each statement and forwards it to the local office, where patterns are analyzed. Too many small errors, and a person's file thickens. Eventually, the file becomes heavy enough to crush them. In some towns, surveillance takes a more tangible form. Streets are equipped with hidden loudspeakers disguised as electrical boxes. They can broadcast orders or patriotic music, but more often they remain silent, reminding people that a voice could speak at any moment. In offices, phones are built with a permanent line connected to central monitoring stations. Even domestic appliances, imported from China, are inspected to ensure no hidden memory cards or USB ports could carry forbidden media. The borders of privacy are not merely blurred, they never existed. The language of fear has evolved into its own dialect. People use coded phrases that sound loyal, but conceal private thoughts. To say someone is too quiet these days might mean they are under investigation. To remark that the harvest was good this year might hint that a family survived another inspection. Even laughter carries subtext. Too loud, and it signals drunken carelessness. Too restrained, and it suggests anxiety. In a society where meaning is dangerous, ambiguity becomes survival. The secret police recruit not only through ideology, but through necessity. Promising young men from poor families are offered positions in exchange for privileges. Better housing, more food, the right to live in Pyongyang. Once inside, they are trained in interrogation, surveillance psychology, and deception. They learn how to make someone speak without asking direct questions, how to detect lies by analyzing breathing patterns, how to write reports that please superiors. Many begin with genuine belief in protecting their nation, but belief erodes quickly in a world where every action is suspect. Some agents write false reports just to meet quotas. Others fabricate arrests to demonstrate efficiency. Truth dissolves into usefulness. The interrogations themselves are methodical, stripped of overt violence but heavy with psychological manipulation. Suspects are isolated for days under bright lights, questioned repeatedly, deprived of sleep until they contradict themselves. The goal is not confession, it is self-annihilation. The prisoner must come to believe that the state already knows everything, that resistance is absurd. In this sense, every interrogation is a performance of inevitability. Once the suspect accepts that guilt is predetermined, they become a prop in their own destruction. At the highest levels, the secret police monitor not only civilians, but the elite. Even within Pyongyang's privileged compounds, microphones hide behind picture frames. High-ranking officials live with the constant knowledge that their dinner conversations could be replayed in another room. This breeds a peculiar kind of paranoia, one that turns power itself into a prison. To survive near the top, one must anticipate the mood of the leader before he expresses it, mirror his tone, and echo his silences. Misreading his expression by a fraction of a second can mean demotion, exile, or worse. Thus, even those who enforce fear are ruled by it. Occasionally, the machinery falters. A defected officer once described how entire cases were built on rumors misheard in factories. A worker had joked that his lunch tasted better than the rations from the army, and by the time the story reached the local committee, it had transformed into an accusation of treason. The man and his family disappeared. The officer later admitted that no one believed the charge. But the process had to continue. Otherwise, someone would accuse the investigators of leniency. The logic of survival demanded sacrifice. In rural areas, where communication is slower, the control is more primitive, but no less effective. Village chiefs compile weekly reports summarizing political atmosphere. They describe how often residents smiled during collective farming, how enthusiastically they sang revolutionary songs, how loudly they applauded when a local official mentioned the supreme leader. The reports travel up the chain, becoming part of national statistics presented as proof of unity. Beneath those numbers lies a landscape of coerced emotion, a nation performing happiness under threat of disappearance. The digital age, rather than weakening this apparatus, has refined it. The regime developed its own intranet, Kwangmyong, isolated from the global web. Every computer sold within the country is preloaded with surveillance software that records usage. USB drives are illegal without a permit, and any foreign media found in possession can lead to imprisonment. Agents patrol train stations and markets with scanners capable of detecting data signals. Yet despite the risk, smuggled flash drives circulate in secret, carrying South Korean dramas, pop music, fragments of another world. For many, these stolen images are the first glimpse of life beyond the wall, and for the secret police they are the most dangerous threat. Curiosity. Curiosity is unpredictable. It cannot be arrested, only redirected. So the regime floods citizens with controlled narratives, movies where traitors are always caught, plays where loyalty is rewarded with comfort, television programs showing grateful farmers thanking the party. Every story ends the same way. Obedience brings peace, disobedience brings ruin. Over time, fiction becomes the template for reality. People behave as if the scripts were instructions for living. The secret police do not need to enforce every rule, the stories do it for them. In Pyongyang's grand squares, parades unfold with flawless synchronization. Tens of thousands march, their faces identical masks of pride. Foreign journalists often describe these spectacles as robotic. But within the choreography lies a message. The erasure of individuality is complete. Each participant has been rehearsed for weeks, monitored for precision, corrected for enthusiasm. The secret police stand among them, disguised as coordinators, noting who falters, who hesitates, who looks away from the portrait of the leader. Later, those notes will become new reports. Even the architecture collaborates. Buildings are arranged so that main streets radiate toward giant monuments of the Kim dynasty, forcing citizens to face the symbols of power daily. The skyline itself is an instrument of surveillance. From the top floors of the Ryugyong Hotel, closed to the public, observers can look across the city, tracking patterns of movement, gatherings, or lights that stay on too long. Every design serves a single purpose: to remind the population that their lives unfold under watchful eyes. Among all these mechanisms, one stands out for its quiet cruelty: collective punishment. If a person commits an ideological crime, their entire family, sometimes their entire neighborhood, is implicated. The fear of dragging loved ones into ruin silences dissent more effectively than any prison. Parents teach children caution, not out of ideology, but protection. A father warns his son never to question authority, not because he believes in the party, but because he loves him. Thus, the system feeds on its own victim's affection, weaponizing it. There are moments when the facade cracks, brief, fragile glimpses of humanity beneath control. A teacher slipping a kind word to a hungry student, a guard allowing a prisoner to rest, an officer looking away during a forbidden song. These gestures are tiny rebellions, quickly buried under routine. Yet they reveal something vital, that even within total surveillance, conscience survives in flickers. The regime knows this, which is why it crushes empathy with the same vigor as dissent. To care too much is to risk exposure. Outside observers sometimes wonder how such a system can persist for decades. The answer lies in its adaptability. The secret police have learned to evolve with technology, to predict social shifts before they happen, to merge propaganda with entertainment, fear with pride. The line between voluntary loyalty and coerced obedience has blurred so completely that even insiders cannot tell them apart. People obey not only because they are forced to, but because the alternative, silence, exile, death, has become unimaginable. And yet beneath this machinery cracks widen. Every act of surveillance breeds resentment. Every report filed leaves someone broken. The system consumes its own stability. A single whisper of truth once heard multiplies in secret. In the border provinces, traders returning from China carry stories that contradict official broadcasts. They tell of electric lights that never go out, of markets overflowing with food, of songs that speak of love instead of loyalty. Those who hear these stories do not speak of them openly, but something shifts. The regime senses it. The secret police tighten their grip, but curiosity, once awakened, cannot be erased. Night descends again over Pyongyang. The officers file their reports, extinguish the lamps, and step into the cold air. Across the city, identical buildings swallow their inhabitants in silence. Somewhere, a woman writes in her diary about the stars she can barely see through the smog, wondering if someone else somewhere can see the same ones. She closes the notebook quickly. She knows it could cost her life, but for a moment, as she hides it beneath the floorboard, she feels free. And in that brief, dangerous act, the act of writing what cannot be spoken, the secret police lose a fragment of their power. There is a moment in every North Korean's life when the invisible becomes tangible. It might be the night the knock comes at the door. It might be the day a neighbor vanishes and their house is sealed, their portrait of the leader left hanging like a ghost on the wall. It might be the first time a young man is summoned to the local security office and realizes that the words he spoke weeks ago have been repeated, recorded, and twisted into evidence. That is when the idea of the secret police stops being abstract and becomes flesh, cold, methodical human flesh. And yet, even then, the machinery behind it remains unseen. The accused never meets the true architects of their fear. They meet only the intermediaries, the voices of a system that has no face. The descent begins quietly. An official notice arrives, sometimes polite, sometimes abrupt, summoning a citizen for questioning. The tone is deceptively neutral. Please report for an interview concerning recent social behavior. The recipient knows what it means. It does not matter whether they are guilty. In this world, the concept of guilt is fluid, determined not by law but by necessity. Someone must always be found responsible, and when the machinery of fear requires fuel, innocence burns just as well. At the local office, the walls are painted the same grey as the city outside. A portrait of Kim Jong-un watches from above the desk. The first questions are harmless. Where do you work? Who are your friends? What do you think of our nation's progress? But each question conceals another. Each answer is dissected not for its content, but for its tone. The investigator watches eyes, breath, hesitation. Behind him, a tape recorder hums softly. The air smells of stale cigarettes and damp paper. Time stretches until the difference between minutes and hours dissolves. The suspect begins to talk more, filling the silence with words meant to protect him, not realizing that every word adds another thread to the web, tightening around him. When the interrogation ends, he is told to return the next day. He goes home in silence, avoiding eye contact with neighbors. His wife asks nothing. She already knows. That night he lies awake, replaying every sentence he spoke. Did he sound too defensive? Did he mention something wrong? Did the officer's pen pause too long when he said he once listened to a song from China? At dawn, the loudspeakers outside play patriotic music and the city wakes up. But he no longer hears it. All he hears is the echo of his own voice, now foreign to him. Sometimes they never call again. Weeks pass and life resumes, though nothing feels the same. The man becomes cautious in every gesture, every greeting. The fear lingers like static. That is the secret police's greatest deficiency. They do not need to arrest everyone. They only need to arrest enough to make everyone believe they could be next. Others are not so lucky. They are taken at night. The knock is soft, almost courteous. 3 men stand outside, one holding a clipboard, another a flashlight. The family is told there has been a misunderstanding. The accused is escorted away barefoot, promising to return soon. The door closes. The wife waits. Days become weeks. She visits the local office, bringing food, letters, anything. She is told there is no record of her husband. She goes again the next day and the next, until the officer warns her that persistence itself is suspicious. She stops asking. The children learn to forget. The name is erased from the neighborhood register. The apartment remains empty, its silence absorbing the secret. For those who disappear into the labyrinth, the descent continues underground. Literally. Beneath Pyongyang and other major cities lie facilities that do not appear on any map. They are known as Kyowaso and Kwanliso, re-education and political prison camps. From above, they look like factories or farms. Inside, they are empires of suffering, invisible to the world. Prisoners there are not numbered by crime, but by category. Reactionary, defector, traitor, ideological contaminant. Some were teachers who misplaced a photograph of the leader. Others were soldiers who fell asleep during a speech. Their crimes are absurd, but the punishment is consistent, erasure through labor. In the camps, the secret police's authority is absolute. Guards act not as mere enforcers, but as instruments of ideology. Every task, from shoveling coal to stitching uniforms, is accompanied by lectures on loyalty. Prisoners work from before dawn until after dark. Meals consist of corn gruel so thin it disappears before it reaches the stomach. Anyone caught hoarding food is accused of greed against the collective. The punishment varies: beating, isolation, or public execution. The purpose is not just to discipline, but to remind the living that survival is conditional. There are stories whispered among defectors of what happens inside these camps. A man forced to watch his friend's execution, then ordered to clap. A woman giving birth on the ground, the infant taken away moments later. A prisoner who carved a small cross from wood and was hanged for importing foreign superstition. The secret police deny these accounts, but their silence confirms them. In North Korea, denial is the final act of confession. Even outside the camps, the control of the Bowibu extends to every aspect of daily existence. At work, people must attend Senghwal-chonghwa, weekly sessions of ideological self-criticism. Each person stands before their peers to confess minor failures, forgetting a slogan, showing fatigue during a parade, thinking unpatriotic thoughts. Others then criticize them, rehearsing outrage until it sounds genuine. The ritual is exhausting, humiliating, but also oddly comforting. It offers the illusion of purification, a chance to empty fear through words, and yet every confession is recorded, filed, and remembered. The cycle repeats endlessly, creating citizens who condemn themselves before anyone else can. Within this machinery of confession, language itself becomes corrupted. Words like freedom, truth, and choice no longer carry meaning. They are replaced with phrases like our way, correct thinking, eternal loyalty. Children recite them in songs, adults use them automatically. In time, the vocabulary of obedience replaces the vocabulary of individuality. To express genuine emotion becomes linguistically impossible. The human experience is rewritten into grammar that serves the state. The Bowibu's reach extends into art, religion, and love. Every painting, every play, every song must glorify the leader. Musicians who attempt to compose beyond approved melodies are summoned for questioning. Writers learn to hide metaphors inside metaphors, creating stories that sound patriotic but whisper rebellion between the lines. Some succeed for a while. Most are caught. Love letters are inspected for sentimentality that distracts from revolutionary devotion. Even intimacy becomes political. Citizens are encouraged to marry within their class, to bear children who will serve as loyal citizens. Passion is replaced by duty, affection by gratitude. For many, the greatest tragedy is not imprisonment, but the slow erosion of the self. The constant vigilance required to survive transforms people into their own wardens. A mother scolds her child for asking why there is no electricity, not because she believes in the system, but because she fears what he might say in school. A young man deletes a secret thought before it forms. An old man smiles at a portrait he no longer reveres, the gesture now instinctual. Over time, the boundary between genuine and performative disappears. What begins as fear ends as habit. There are, however, those who refuse to bend completely. Small acts of defiance survive, fragile as candlelight. A teacher hides pages from banned South Korean novels in her textbook, reading them under blankets at night. A soldier stationed near the border smuggles a radio receiver and listens to foreign broadcasts through static, his heart pounding at every crackle. A group of villagers share forbidden food, whispering prayers before eating. These are not organized rebellions, but quiet affirmations of humanity. The secret police call them thought crimes. The world might call them hope. When such defiance is discovered, the punishment is swift. The accused are paraded before their peers during mass criticism sessions. Neighbors are required to shout accusations, rehearsing outrage. Some cry while they do it, but tears are interpreted as guilt. The condemned are taken away. Sometimes they are never seen again, sometimes weeks later, their families receive a small box containing ashes and a state certificate praising their contribution to social harmony. The certificate is the final irony. The state thanks its victims for existing long enough to prove the power of fear. Inside the ministries, officers write endless reports about these cases. The language is sterile. Subject exhibited prolonged ideological deviation. Corrective measures applied. Outcome satisfactory. Behind those words lies a human story stripped of identity. The officers read these reports until emotion becomes irrelevant. In their eyes, they are not torturers or jailers. They are administrators of order. The system is too vast to see in moral terms. Each man believes he is just a cog turning the wheel. But the wheel crushes everything beneath it, and they are trapped in its motion as much as the people they watch. Psychological control is not maintained through violence alone. It thrives on repetition. From childhood to old age, citizens hear the same phrases. Without the leader, we are nothing. Thanks to the leader, we live. The leader watches over us. The words seep into the subconscious, merging faith with fear. Some believe sincerely, others pretend. In time, belief and pretense become indistinguishable. To doubt is exhausting. To obey is easier. The mind adapts, not out of loyalty, but out of survival. Yet even within this despair, the human heart rebels in secret. In a village near the Chinese border, a mother tells her daughter bedtime stories about a place beyond the mountains where people can speak freely. She never names it, but the girl imagines it vividly, the colors, the laughter, the light. Years later, that same girl becomes a smuggler, carrying goods and whispers across frozen rivers. She risks everything, not for politics, but to touch the idea her mother planted, a world without watchers. The secret police hunt her. They call her a traitor. She calls herself alive. The descent of this story is not a single event, but a collective condition, a nation sinking beneath the weight of its own silence, streets filled with portraits instead of faces, conversations that circle endlessly around slogans, a people trained to forget that words once belonged to them. The secret police do not need to destroy everyone. They need only to destroy language, and the rest follows naturally. There are rumors among defectors that within the secret police itself, some officers keep forbidden diaries, not for rebellion but to record their own confusion. They write about the nightmares, the sleepless nights, the faces of those they interrogated. Some end their entries with apologies no one will ever read. Perhaps even they understand that the system consumes not only its victims, but its enforcers. In a nation where truth is forbidden, guilt becomes universal. And so the machinery continues, sustained by fear and by those who fear to stop it. The country breathes in unison, a vast organism whose heartbeat is silence. The people live suspended between devotion and despair, unable to separate one from the other. Outside, the world speculates, condemns, forgets. But inside, the descent continues quietly, day after day, generation after generation, until fear becomes heritage. Somewhere far from the capital, in the shadow of mountains where no tourists go, a camp whistle blows before dawn. Prisoners rise, thin silhouettes against the mist. They form lines, bow toward the horizon, and begin their labor. Above them, a guard lights a cigarette, watching. The smoke drifts upward and disappears into the grey. No one speaks. The world beyond the fence might as well be another planet. For them, the secret police are not men. They are gravity, unseen, but inescapable. And as the sun rises over the land of enforced silence, one truth remains unspoken, that every system built on fear eventually fears itself. But that realization, like every dangerous truth here, must wait in the dark, hidden beneath layers of obedience, waiting for a voice brave or desperate enough to say it aloud. There are moments when the facade of silence flickers. Small, almost imperceptible cracks appear in the image North Korea projects to the world. It happens when a defector speaks from a foreign television studio, their voice trembling as they describe things they were never supposed to survive. It happens when satellite photos show dark mountains interrupted by bright compounds, hidden estates, unseen cities. And it happens, most unsettling of all, when a foreign visitor glimpses something they were not meant to notice. A glance, a shadow, an object out of place. The regime works tirelessly to erase these moments, but truth, like light, leaks through even the smallest openings. The secret police do not simply watch the people, they choreograph what the world sees. When foreign delegations arrive in Pyongyang, routes are mapped months in advance. Every window along the street is checked, every curtain adjusted. Locals are selected to play citizens, cheerful students, polite factory workers, families in neat clothes. They rehearse smiles as if performing in a theater. Meanwhile, the real city remains behind closed doors, darkened apartments filled with silence. Tourists marvel at the order, the cleanliness, the apparent devotion of the people. They do not realize that the streets themselves are actors. Beyond these curated zones lie areas so restricted they may as well not exist. The Bawibu oversees entire districts closed to all outsiders, even to most citizens. Among them are underground research facilities, nuclear testing sites, and compounds rumored to house the elite. These enclaves have electricity 24 hours a day, imported goods and medical care unavailable anywhere else. Their residents, scientists, high-ranking officers, and the families of the ruling class live in guarded privilege. They are watched as closely as they are protected. Luxury in North Korea is not freedom, it is confinement, gilded with abundance. Defectors speak of these secret districts as mirror worlds, reflections of the society above, but distorted by excess. In Pyongyang's eastern hills, for example, lies Kangsong, a neighborhood invisible on public maps. It is said to contain palaces for the Kim family, artificial lakes, private theaters, even a small zoo. Access is restricted to those with high songbun, and entry is controlled by biometric checkpoints. Yet within this luxury, surveillance is absolute. The servants who clean the floors, the gardeners who trim the trees, all are informants. Conversations in these estates are monitored through concealed intercom systems, and even the laughter of the privileged is measured for sincerity. The walls may gleam, but they listen. The contrast between surface poverty and hidden wealth is not an accident. It is a design meant to reinforce belief in hierarchy. The secret police ensure that no one ever forgets who lives above them. In provincial towns, citizens receive glimpses of luxury only through propaganda films. The camera pans over banquet tables, imported cars, and radiant portraits of the leader smiling benevolently. The narration explains that this comfort exists for those who serve faithfully. It is a promise and a warning at once. Obedience is rewarded, but envy is treason. Inside the regime, corruption thrives under the pretext of loyalty. Officers who uncover smuggling networks often become part of them, siphoning bribes from traders desperate to survive. The border regions, especially near the Tumen and Yalu rivers, are riddled with secret economies. Here the line between enforcer and criminal vanishes. The Bawibu maintains its presence through fear, but it also profits from the very black markets it condemns. It is a paradox sustained by necessity. The system cannot function without the corruption it pretends to eradicate. Beyond the borders, the reach of North Korea's secret police extends into foreign soil. Defectors who manage to escape to China live in perpetual fear of capture. The Boibu operates through networks of hired brokers, informants, and sympathetic local officials. They track phone calls, trace money transfers, and intercept messages from defectors trying to contact families left behind. When a defector is found, the punishment is brutal. They are dragged back across the river, paraded through border towns as a warning, and often executed in secret. Their families are exiled to labor camps, condemned by association. The message is clear: escape is not freedom if love ties you to those still inside. Some defectors vanish without explanation. Activists in South Korea whisper of agents embedded among refugee communities, posing as fellow escapees. Their mission is to monitor, report, and sometimes assassinate. These spies live double lives, outwardly victims, inwardly instruments of the state. The psychological toll is immense. They fear exposure by their new neighbors as much as they fear failure reported to their old masters. Many defectors learn to trust no one, carrying their paranoia like an organ transplanted from home. Foreign embassies in Pyongyang are not exempt from the surveillance net. Their buildings are wired, their movements restricted. Diplomats' phones are tapped, their translators doubled as informants. Even humanitarian workers who bring food and aid are shadowed by minders. Every conversation is reported, every handshake noted. The regime uses these reports to gauge international sentiment, adjusting propaganda accordingly. When the world criticizes its human rights abuses, the state responds not with denial, but with performance, releasing staged footage of happy farmers and singing children. It is a theater of empathy, orchestrated by the same hands that build the prisons. Within the upper ranks, secrecy becomes a form of power. High officials live in fear of being purged, yet they also rely on the system to survive. Loyalty is demonstrated through constant vigilance. Ministers spy on subordinates, subordinates spy on ministers. Once a year, internal purges cleanse the ranks, removing those whose ambition or hesitation might threaten stability. The process is ritualized: a sudden announcement at a party meeting, a televised confession, a disappearance. The message reverberates through the bureaucracy. Loyalty is temporary, suspicion eternal. The world often imagines North Korea as frozen in time, but the secret police have evolved into a hybrid of old totalitarianism and modern surveillance. In Pyongyang's Ministry of State Security, a division of young officers monitors digital communication. They analyze intercepted texts, hack into foreign networks, and manipulate online discourse. The regime's cyber units operate globally, stealing data, laundering cryptocurrency, spreading disinformation. In the digital realm, North Korea's isolation becomes weaponized. The same tools used to suppress its citizens are turned outward, transforming secrecy into strategy. Yet, within these advancements lies the same ancient fear. Technology amplifies control but cannot conceal the rot beneath. Every byte of stolen data, every propaganda video, every censored word adds another layer of illusion, a fragile armor against truth. The secret police understand this better than anyone. They are not just enforcers, they are curators of unreality. Their task is not to make citizens believe, but to make belief irrelevant. When reality itself is monopolized, obedience no longer requires conviction. Still, the cracks grow. In markets across the country, traders whisper of strange goods: USB drives filled with foreign music, Chinese smartphones modified to catch outside signals, miniature radios disguised as toys. These devices travel hand to hand, invisible to the state, carrying fragments of forbidden worlds. A love song from Seoul, a comedy skit from Tokyo, a documentary showing cities lit by neon. Not propaganda, each byte is a contagion of imagination. And imagination, once infected, cannot be cured. The Bowibu knows this. They conduct raids, sweep markets, and arrest teenagers caught watching dramas. But each arrest only spreads more curiosity. People whisper about what was seen before the arrest, What image was so dangerous it required punishment? The story grows, mutates, and spreads like wildfire. The regime tries to stamp it out, but every act of suppression becomes advertisement. Fear, once an asset, becomes a liability. Defectors who manage to escape to the south often describe the moment they first realized the regime's image was false. It is rarely political. It is usually something small. Seeing a photograph of a supermarket overflowing with food, watching a South Korean soap opera where characters argue freely, hearing a pop song that speaks of love instead of duty. These glimpses break the spell. They realize that beyond the walls of propaganda lies an ordinary world where people live without terror. For those still inside, the secret police's mission is to prevent such realization. Their task is not to guard borders of geography, but borders of perception. There are persistent rumors, even among insiders, of a secret city beneath Mount Paektu, sacred to the Kim dynasty. It is said to house research laboratories, military bunkers, and underground railways connecting directly to Pyongyang. The air there is filtered, the walls reinforced, the corridors lit by eternal fluorescence. Only the highest officials and scientists have access. Some say Kim Jong-un himself retreats there during crises, surrounded by loyal guards. Others whisper that even he fears the surveillance within those tunnels, that cameras watch him too, operated by men whose loyalty belongs not to him but to the system itself. Whether true or myth, the story endures because it fits the logic of this world. Even the most powerful are prisoners of their own creation. To outsiders, the enormity of this structure is almost incomprehensible. How can an entire population sustain such control for decades? The answer lies in the symbiosis between fear and faith. The regime gives people meaning even as it crushes them. It offers identity, community, and an explanation for suffering. The secret police ensure that this meaning never unravels. They are both enforcers and priests, guarding the orthodoxy of belief. Every act of obedience becomes a prayer, every betrayal a confession. The result is a society where morality itself is inverted, where silence is virtue and truth is sin. But truth has a way of resurfacing. It returns through the voices of those who escaped, through the flicker of contraband videos, through the whispers that survive interrogation. The Boibu cannot fully contain it. For every file they compile, a memory slips through. For every execution, a survivor speaks abroad. The regime responds with threats, but words once free travel faster than fear. Somewhere in a foreign cafe, a defector tells her story to a journalist. Somewhere else, another watches a clip from Pyongyang and recognizes a friend long presumed dead. The distance between silence and exposure narrows. And yet, within the country, nothing seems to change. The parades continue, the portraits remain. But beneath the surface, awareness grows, quiet, dangerous, invisible. It grows in the eyes of market women who trade more than goods, in the hearts of young soldiers who glimpse the lights across the border, in the minds of officers who wonder whether loyalty is worth the cost. The secret police feel it too. Their reports grow longer, more anxious, filled with words like unpredictable mood, increased curiosity, unusual gatherings. The machinery trembles, but it keeps moving. It always does. Night returns to Pyongyang. The boulevards glisten under the rain, reflecting the statues that loom over the city. Inside a guarded compound, a man in uniform reviews surveillance footage. Frame by frame, he watches faces on a crowded street. He zooms in on a woman smiling to herself, then writes her name in a report. He does not know why she smiled, and it doesn't matter. Her expression exists outside the script, and in this country, that is enough to make her visible. Somewhere else, in a small apartment, that same woman sits by the window. She knows the risks, but she smiles again, faintly. It is not defiance, not hope, but a momentary reminder of herself, the part that the system could never fully claim. She looks out at the city, the rain, the endless grey, and for a breath, she imagines that beyond the horizon, someone is listening, someone who might one day tell her story. There are nights when Pyongyang feels almost peaceful. The streets, washed in pale moonlight, seem emptied of fear, as if the city itself is asleep. The statues stand motionless. their faces illuminated by the faint glow of street lamps that never go out. The air carries no voices, no music, no laughter, just the hum of distant generators and the echo of discipline. But beneath this silence lies an entire nation of restless minds, each trained to never reveal what it dreams. The illusion of peace is perfect. It must be, because the moment it breaks, the truth would spill across the land like light flooding a sealed room. And light, in a world built on shadows, is the ultimate threat. For 75 years, the machinery of control has turned with mechanical precision. Fathers teach sons how to survive its rhythm. Teachers instruct students on what not to feel. The state tells its people what to remember and what must be forgotten. Every citizen carries a story they cannot tell, a memory they cannot erase, and a fear they cannot describe. It is not just a political system. It is a psychological inheritance passed from generation to generation. The secret police are its guardians, the memory keepers of silence. They do not merely enforce obedience, they preserve a state of collective amnesia. Imagine a man who has lived his entire life under surveillance. He wakes before dawn, washes in cold water, recites a pledge of loyalty. At work, he repeats the same slogans until they lose all meaning. He speaks carefully, laughs softly, dreams privately. At night, he listens to the state radio, the same voice that has narrated his entire existence. He does not believe it, yet he does not disbelieve it either. To him, belief is a luxury and skepticism is suicide. He lives suspended between knowing and pretending, aware that his own thoughts have been edited by years of vigilance. He is both prisoner and warden, both victim and accomplice, and he is not alone. In every regime built on fear, the greatest illusion is permanence. But even the strongest illusion fades when its believers begin to see themselves from the outside. For North Koreans who escape, the first shock is not freedom, it is perspective. They look back and realize that what once felt natural was not normal. They remember the daily rituals, the rehearsed gratitude, the way even joy was rationed. Some cannot bear the contrast. They miss the certainty of obedience. Others feel guilt so deep it never leaves them. They wonder if their silence made them complicit. In that question lies the most painful truth, that survival in such a system demands collaboration, however unwilling. The secret police understand this. Their genius lies in transforming moral conflict into stability. They do not need absolute belief, they need exhaustion. When people grow too tired to question, control becomes effortless. Every arrest, every confession, every report reinforces the lesson. Thinking differently is dangerous. Caring deeply is reckless. Remembering truth is futile. Over time, the people internalize the logic of power until it becomes instinct. They stop asking why. They start asking only how. How to live another day. How to avoid notice. How to breathe without being heard. Yet even within this exhaustion, something remains unbroken. It exists in the smallest gestures. A mother hiding a forbidden photograph. A boy humming a banned melody, an old man closing his eyes during the anthem. These are not acts of rebellion, but of remembrance. They remind the self that it still exists beneath the layers of fear. The secret police cannot fully extinguish that spark. They can terrify it, isolate it, bury it, but they cannot kill it. Humanity has a way of surviving in whispers. Outside observers often speak of North Korea as if it were a single frozen mind. But that is an illusion of distance. Inside, beneath the uniform slogans and choreographed devotion, countless individual minds endure. They dream of small freedoms, a conversation without consequence, a thought without witness, a night without inspection. They imagine life without the constant awareness of being watched. These dreams are fragile, but they are the quiet heartbeat of resistance. The agents of the Boibu too are caught in this paradox. Some of them joined out of ambition, others out of fear. Many stay because leaving is impossible. They read the confessions, they watch the footage, they write the reports, but at night, when they remove their uniforms, they too wonder what it means. Some stare at the portraits on their walls and see not leaders, but mirrors reflecting their own imprisonment. They cannot say this aloud, but the thought lingers. The watchers are watched, the loyal fear betrayal. and the architects of control become slaves to their own invention. There are defectors who once served in the secret police. When they speak, their voices carry both authority and shame. They describe the machinery not as monstrous, but as ordinary. They speak of paperwork, of meetings, of the constant demand to find enemies. They say the true horror is not in cruelty but in bureaucracy, the slow, steady normalization of evil. One former officer confessed that the hardest part was not the orders he followed, but the moment he realized he no longer needed them. Fear had become his instinct. It had replaced conscience. And when conscience returns, it comes as silence, heavy and unforgiving. Beyond the borders, the world watches with fascination and revulsion, documenting every secret revealed, every defector's story, every rumor of dissent. But to the people inside, the outside world feels as distant as the stars. They know it exists, but cannot reach it. Some dream of escape, but most dream of understanding, of knowing why their lives became shadows. The tragedy of North Korea is not only the suffering of its people, but the world's growing numbness to it. Each new revelation fades into the endless noise of global attention. The stories become statistics, and the silence continues. And yet, every now and then, truth breaches the wall. A photo smuggled across the border, a testimony broadcast on foreign radio, a satellite image revealing the hidden architecture of oppression. These fragments accumulate, piece by piece, building an invisible archive of resistance. The regime cannot destroy what it cannot see. For every word the secret police erase, another is written elsewhere. For every life silenced, another voice speaks. The process is slow, agonizing, but irreversible. Truth does not vanish, it waits. Inside Pyongyang, as the city sleeps, the network hums. Wires beneath the streets carry the state's commands. Cameras blink in corridors, files multiply in drawers. And yet somewhere in those same offices a clerk hesitates before stamping a document. A thought crosses his mind. What if all this watching, all this fear, is built on a lie? He pushes the thought away, but it lingers like static in the air. Perhaps one day it will return. Change in North Korea will not begin with an explosion or a coup. It will begin with a thought that refuses to die. In the end, control cannot outlast consciousness. The secret police may command silence, but they cannot command understanding. The human mind, once awakened, begins to unravel the illusion. It may take years, decades, generations, but eventually fear collapses under its own weight. The same machinery that watches everyone will begin to watch itself. And when that happens, the system will crumble, not with a roar, but with a whisper, the quietest revolution imaginable. Until that day, the country remains suspended in its performance, an entire nation reciting a script written long ago. The secret police continue their work, not realizing that they are also preserving their own ending, because every file, every record, every act of surveillance is also an archive of guilt, and archives, once opened, become history. One day, perhaps, the streets of Pyongyang will echo with unchoreographed laughter. The portraits will come down. The walls will lose their ears. The air will fill with words that have been waiting for decades to be spoken. People will tell their stories, not as victims, but as witnesses, and the ghosts of those who vanished will finally be heard. But until then, the city sleeps beneath its shroud of light. The guards patrol their routes, the loudspeakers hum with static, and somewhere, deep within the Ministry of State Security, an officer closes a file and looks at his reflection in the dark window. For a moment, he sees not authority, but a man haunted by the sound of his own silence. He blinks, and the illusion returns. The lights stay on. The reports keep coming. The machine keeps moving. Outside, the wind passes through empty streets, carrying with it the echoes of unspoken words. They drift over the monuments, over the river, over the invisible borders of fear. And in that invisible current, soft, patient, unstoppable, lies the beginning of freedom.